Long-lasting customer relationships lead to sustainable e-commerce growth. Loyalty Lion's combination of best-in-class technology and dedicated loyalty expertise will help you connect with customers and increase their lifetime value. Proven to increase customer retention and spend, our platform helps thousands of marketers drive more revenue from the customers that matter. Learn more at loyaltylion.com.
Welcome to Total Retail Talks, your podcast channel for retail knowledge.
Hello, and welcome to this episode of Total Retail Talks. I'm Joe Keenan, editor-in-chief of Total Retail. I am joined on today's episode by Jason Kuipers, the founder and CEO of ZOX. We're going to talk to Jason a little bit about the ZOX story, how he founded the brand with his brothers, and all the good that it's doing as a company, as well as also its recent partnership with Facebook and its live stream shopping testing. So thanks for joining me today, Jason.
Thanks for having me, Joe. I appreciate it.
So I wanted to get started by having you tell our audience a little bit about your professional background, and then tell us a little bit about ZOX for those that aren't familiar with the company.
Sure. My background really starts in marketing, a lot of advertising, earlier on in the online space, doing a lot of media buying back in the day. And I remember one of my favorite things when I would do media buys for other companies was imagining if I could somehow be that company someday, if I could be the one that everybody was approaching, trying to be able to spend their media budget or, have as a client. And I think that ZOX wasn't necessarily, because of that specifically, but it had always been something in the back of my mind that I wanted to build a business that was bigger than myself. And when we started ZOX, actually over 10 years ago now, it originally started as me going to different fabric stores. So Joann's Fabric, I think we went to Michael's for some paint markers. And then literally just started painting on pieces of elastic by hand. And I went back to Michigan, where my family is, and my brothers, who at the time were in middle school and high school, saw my wristband. My youngest brother, Jordan, said it was fresh, which means cool, in case you were not aware. So I was like, okay, that's cool. These are fresh, I suppose. So I actually took them to the same stores out in Michigan. And I still remember the first night we made these together. We all sat down at a kitchen table and had what we kind of referred to back as a Kuipers family arts and crafts night, where my mom sat there, sewed them together for us. And my dad was actually the one who originally suggested the names. His original suggestion was actually ZOX straps, because he said we were making them out of boxer material. And he's like, it rhymes with jock straps. It's kitschy. People remember it. And I totally blew it off at that point, saying, yeah, okay, sure. If we ever start a company, we'll call it ZOX straps. And obviously we shortened it now to just ZOX, but here we are, 11 years later, 10 and a half years later, and it's grown quite nicely.
Yeah, so a real family affair in kind of starting the company. And just tell us a little bit about the product itself. I know that there are inspirational messages on the product, and then secondly, tell us a little bit about your inspiration to start ZOX.
Sure. Well, the product itself, yes, it's they're elastic bracelets that we print on, sew together. But a big part of it for us, even when we started, was creating something that actually had meaning behind it. We like to say now our goal is to changing the world with kind words. And such a huge part of that inspiration for us has been seeing the kind of feedback that we get from customers and collectors who will share kind of the stories that they've had behind the different ZOX they've given out to other people. So whether it's they've gotten one for themselves, they've gotten one for somebody else, really the inspiration more than anything else, I would say, is based off the fact that we're listening to our audience to begin with, and really making things that, first of all, that we wished existed, and then really taking it from there and letting our entire community really decide what are the reminders that we need. We refer to ZOX as it's funny when you start a company, you are always trying to force yourself to think about it. What is the most concise terms you could use to explain what you do? And for us, we literally refer to it as uplifting wearable reminders. And I feel like that really encompasses so much of it, because the reality is that, we have so many thoughts in a day. I remember a recent study I read talked about the average human has around 60,000 thoughts a day. And of those thoughts, about 80% of them are negative and 95% of them are repetitive, which means that on average, all of us are sitting here worrying about the same thing we were worrying about yesterday every single day. Yeah. And I think a lot of the inspiration behind ZOX was really identifying that and then trying to figure out how we could fix it, right? Like it was funny when we first started ZOX, everybody would be like, well, what do they do? This was at a time when I think it was balance bands were out. And if your wristband didn't make you balance better, then it just wasn't doing anything, right? So when we had to kind of explain to people, they don't really do anything. Like they don't have like a function like that. They're more inspirational. And I think now, especially as, our society has become more aware of mental health and really the push for people to take care of themselves. That's why I think we've seen ZOX take off in the way we have.
Yeah. So you taught us a little bit about the product, and we're going to talk about selling via Facebook and on that social platform. But other ways of distribution, how else are you selling the product? Direct to consumer through ZOX's website, any other places as well?
Right now, it is only through e-commerce, and that was really, by design. For us, it was really important to be able to really be in control of the entire customer experience. I like to say that I feel like a financial transaction is incredibly intimate, because you realize that somebody is trading a piece of their life at their job for the income that they make. And when they're spending that income on something you've made, it really is a meaningful transaction, right? It's something that you feel like you have to provide them the very best that you possibly could. And so for us, being able to control that experience and make sure it's something that they really enjoy and are really wowed by, I think is a really key part of it for us.
Do you find, because some of these times you see people with like 5 or 6 different bracelets or wristbands, are your products traditionally by most of your customers bought in one bracelet or wristband per purchase, or are they buying multiple at the same time? How are you finding that your customers are purchasing?
That's a great question. So I have a few stats on that. One off the top of my head I can remember is if somebody buys more than one, there's on average a 72% chance that they're buying one as a gift for somebody else. And that is very, very high. The reason for that, though, is I think that, very similar to greeting cards, if you look at really the purpose of a greeting card to begin with, it's to say the words that you might not be able to say yourself, right? And especially when you kind of think about a greeting card, for example, the level of sentiment is really dependent on the relationship that you have with the person that you're trying to give it to, right? And so for us, the ability to create these things that really share that message like that, I think is really impactful.
Is your, and not to go off on a tangent, but the creative inspirational messaging, is that coming from you and your team? How are you kind of handling that work, and who comes up with all of these inspirational phrases that really motivate and inspire people?
That's a great question. We have a team of copywriters here. So we almost, again, treat it kind of similar to the way that you would a greeting card company, something of that sort, where not only with the messages themselves on the wristbands, but we also have these little collector cards that come with them. And that was really, that happened when we very first started ZOX. The first one that we actually sold in public, we did one to wear and one to share. And so we needed a way to tell people, you're not always going to get 2 in a package, but here they are for this one. It's one for you and one to give somebody else. And so because of that, we create these little collector cards. And what was really interesting is from that very first one, from it kind of being an explanation of why there were 2 to today, that little collector card really becomes the equivalent of what you would find on the inside of a greeting card. Will be an extra bit of uplifting text or some affirmation, something like that. And really what we found is that people will buy for a variety of reasons. Some love the art. We collaborate with a lot of incredible artists from all around the world. Some people love the reminder, the words that are on the inside, and they find that being able to wear that with them every day is something that truly helps them. Other people buy it because of the card. Again, like I said, sometimes it's able to say things that we might not be able to say directly ourselves, or might come off as, kind of strange or awkward feeling. But I think embracing that and giving them that ability to have that voice like that is really important. And then lastly, on every single design we create, on the shop page for it itself, we share the story, the inspiration behind it, who it was made for, why we made it for them. I have one in particular that I created after a friend of mine passed away from brain cancer. And it was one of these things that at the time, I didn't know how to even respond to her. When I first found out that she had been diagnosed, it made me feel like I was helpless, right? And I think that being able to kind of put something together and really thinking about her in that position, like, what would I want to remind somebody who knows themselves is not going to make it, right? Like, how do you talk to somebody like that? How do you have a conversation rather than just kind of pulling back? You still are able to engage with them and say, like, I'm still here for you, kind of thing. And so I think that a lot of what we do is based off of that, where our entire team, literally just this morning, we were having another meeting about, the importance of every single piece we make. It has to be meaningful. If people have limited attention spans to begin with, we want every single word we share to be something that is impactful to them.
Yeah, these real world, real life experiences too of you and your team. One more question, and then I'll move on. You talked about kind of the prevalence of the product being gifted, and I don't necessarily know that you would consider ZOX a giftable brand, but the numbers kind of back that up. Do you find that, I wouldn't think it would be, but you're not seasonal in nature, whereas you think of gifting brands that are really heavy in Q4, obviously around the holidays, but these are experiences that are really throughout the course of the year. So is your business seasonal in nature, or is it kind of just, evenly spread more throughout the course of a year?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say it's definitely spread out more throughout the year than just being seasonal. Obviously, like any e-commerce brand or any real retail brand in general, you're going to see a pickup in traffic, especially around Q4. But the reality is that, kind words are always necessary. It's not something that is only needed around the holidays, right? And not only that, you also have the reality that, people are going through things at different times. And so, you asked about the giftability. I would say it's a very, very giftable brand. But again, kind of relating it back to greeting cards, it's kind of similar to a greeting card that you could buy for everybody, including yourself, right? It becomes, you would never actually go and buy a greeting card for yourself. It'd be kind of weird. But something like this, right? Like that becomes, that's almost kind of the interesting perspective of it, right? Is that we think about gifting in terms of, oh, this would be perfect for somebody else. But the reality is that when people are looking on our site, they're finding stuff that they love for themselves. And at the same time, they're seeing other words of encouragement. And they're saying, oh, wow, I know the perfect person for this. I know the perfect, I can totally imagine their face when they get this, that kind of thing. And so because of that, the giftability of it is just absolutely tremendous. Again, like I said, it gives you that ability to say the things that you might not be able to find the words to say otherwise.
Yeah. So what I've learned is that the ZOX wristbands are made out of recycled product. So my question for you, Jason, is tell us a little bit about the role that sustainability plays in ZOX kind of corporate culture. And, really a second part to that is how are you communicating that value proposition to consumers on alerting them to the fact that these are recyclable or recycled product and kind of making that known through the different ways that you're engaging your customers?
Sure. Well, it's kind of interesting. We are collected in over 180 countries around the world. And one of the things that's really interesting about that is we have a very, very excited collector base, where the secondary market, I would actually kind of say, is similar to Beanie Babies right before everybody heard about them. It's honestly incredible. We can kind of talk about that separately, but part of what was interesting about this is as it grew, because of this collectible side of it, we had people in countries like the UK and Australia, for example, who would receive our old packaging. It used to be these really cool envelopes, all nicely packaged up. And I remember getting an email saying, I love this packaging and these are so cool, but it's too much. And I didn't really understand the value of sustainability outside of the US, or, kind of the emphasis that was put on it, until honestly talking with people in other countries and hearing how they perceived it. And I think that, to be honest with you, in a lot of ways, I think the US is kind of lacking in terms of that, caring about actually the sustainability to begin with. And so what we did, you see a lot of brands starting to jump on board now, but I think it's something that really needs more attention to it, because you think about the amount of waste that's produced in an average year, and it's staggering, right? For us in particular, we actually changed all of our packaging to be recycled packaging to begin with, or biodegradable packaging, which is really interesting. And then our wristbands themselves are actually made out of recycled water bottles. And really the way that works, I didn't even realize this was a thing, but it's pretty awesome. We partnered with a company called Reprieve. They're one of the largest recycled product manufacturers in the world. And what they do is they actually make our polyester for us. They take recycled water bottles, shred them up, melt them into these tiny little pellets, and then use this really interesting process to turn these pellets into polyester thread. And we take that thread and actually mill it into elastic. And so now every ZOX wristband we make is the equivalent of removing approximately 1 8-ounce water bottle out of our ecosystem, which is incredible. You really think about taking something that takes, I think it's 10,000 years to decompose, a plastic water bottle, and turning it into something that actually is making a difference in somebody's life. I feel like it's just tremendous.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
So when you ask, about the impact that it plays, I think it's something that, I definitely would say, on exit polls and things like that, that is something that people say is very important to them, is the fact that we actually care about the environment to begin with. Everything we do, we're working towards it being something that is even more eco-friendly. But yeah, I would say that that's a huge part of it for us. When we communicate that to consumers, and kind of the way that we do that is really engaging them wherever they are. I know we're going to talk about Facebook, for example. ZOX was really born on Facebook. Our very first VIP group that we had was started, I think, in 2012. And really all the way back there is where we were listening to customers about things that they thought were important. And so because of that, when we're talking about values for the brand, I think, that's a big part of it, is sharing that ability to emphasize how important it is for us to care about sustainability to begin with.
So I did want to follow up on one piece of your last answer, Jason, in regards to kind of your product being available on some of these secondary markets and the demand for some of the specific wristbands. Is that intentional? To kind of, you hear some about businesses about kind of practicing this scarcity model where they are only producing a certain number to commit to kind of drive that demand. What is kind of your philosophy on that? Was that something that has been done intentionally at ZOX, or is just kind of an output of the demand for the product in general?
That's a great question. I think it's probably a bit of both. When we first started ZOX, I made the very first one. It's a neon green colored one on black elastic, and I made it to match a pair of lemon lime colored Nike Dunks that I had. And for me, I was always really interested in shoes and kind of sneaker culture altogether. And one of the biggest and most interesting things about that is, in the shoe community, so many of the really exciting releases are ones that are limited. Granted, it's on a lot different scale, but for us, a big part of that was from the very first wristbands we ever made, we always numbered everything we ever created, and we put a serial number on it. And so the idea was, if you got one, it'd be very easy to validate, on the inside what number it was total, and then you could go online and figure out what the total number made of them were, in relation to the number that you got. And I think, you can talk about scarcity and different things like that, but the reality is that we want to be transparent in what we're creating. I think as a collectible, that's something that really, I remember, I think I watched a show, it was on Netflix, I believe it was, it was the story of I forget what baseball cards it was, where people said that they were super rare, and then found out that they were just producing them in crazy quantities. And very similar, I should say, opposite of that is really the route that we wanted to go, which was complete transparency, where every single piece was numbered. And so that does lend itself very well to the collector's market, right? Because once something is sold out, we never reproduce it. That's it. And so there has had a very strong secondary market form because of that. To put in perspective for you, on the secondary market, I've seen wristbands that we've sold for $12, for example. I've seen them sell for up to $1,500 for a single wristband. So that's why I say, it's very low key, though. I guess if you looked on eBay at any time, there's probably a fair amount of ZOX for sale in there, but it really depends on the rarity. And what I found, I remember the person who bought that one in particular I'm talking about for $1,500. We had a ZOX meetup in Washington, DC, and he actually pulled it out for the entire group to actually see. And then he quick put it back in the packaging and tucked it back inside, because he's like, it's too valuable. I don't want to ruin it. But even in that vein of things, I'll tell you what, I'm 37 now, and I remember when I was young watching Michael Jordan play basketball, obviously. And one of the highlights of my career was actually getting invited by his team to make wristbands for the Michael Jordan Celebrity Invitational. And I actually got to meet him, which was awesome. He said ZOX were cool, which was even more awesome. I debated just quitting right then because I was leaving on a high note. But
yeah, it's tough to top that, Jason, right?
Yeah,
Michael Jordan telling your product is cool. That's pretty good day.
It was, yeah. And then he actually signed it for me. And so very similarly, he signed my number 23 of that wristband for me, and I put it back in the package, and I have never opened it since then. And so what's interesting, and the reason that I share that, is very similar to the way that other people collect ZOX. I find that I even do that the same way, right? Where you want to be protective of these things, and you want to guard them. They're mementos for you, or they're things that are actually like you enjoy collecting. And I think in that side of things altogether, collectability in itself really has become a moat for our brand, where we don't have competition. There is nobody trying to collect fake ZOX. Just like there was nobody trying to collect fake Beanie Babies, right? It was the exact same thing, where if it doesn't have the little heart logo on the tag, then I don't want it, kind of thing. Back in the day, it's very similar now, where the proof is there of the collectability of what we're doing.
Yeah, and there's kind of, I would imagine, some dual value to your product, because that holds that sentimentality for some customers, while others, so they don't want to wear it because they're like, I don't want to take this out and ruin it, so they're keeping it covered up and enclosed. But there's also I'm gonna imagine, customers that wear them every day, and they want to have it on their wrist and something that they can look at throughout the course of the day.
Oh yeah, and that's kind of the interesting part about it, especially over the past few years. What we've really realized is we have two sides to our business. One is what we refer to as the essential side of it. And what those are designs that we make in a lot higher quantities overall, but they're essential because we feel like they're messaging that everybody could use. And on the other hand, you have the collectability side, and these are a lot more limited releases, whether they're through mystery packs or different things like that, where they're very hard to get. These are where we see collectors who get really excited, especially if they're ones that you have to earn. For example, those are the ones that I feel like people gravitate towards the most, because they're not easy to get. If you kind of look back at Beanie Babies, for example, when they first released, it was all by retailers, right? It wasn't really online. In fact, they say that a big part of the change of their business was going online back in 1999, I think it was. But prior to that, part of the fun was in the actual experience of getting to discover new ones at different retailers. And I think that's kind of difficult to do when you're online and everything is available everywhere, right? And that is a big part of kind of the experience for us, is figuring out ways to make it still difficult to get everything. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we could probably talk another half hour about the secondary market and kind of because I find it super interesting. But I'll move on. In the interest of time, I'll move on. I do have one before we talk a little bit about kind of ZOX and how it's live shopping partnership with Facebook, I do have one other piece of the business that I think is really important that we call out and get your thoughts on. And that's kind of the philanthropic piece of the business as well. So ZOX donates a portion of its proceeds to Thirst Project. So I want you to tell us a little bit about that initiative and why it's so important to both, your brand as well as your customers.
Sure. Seth from Spur Project was actually just out here last week. He did a presentation for our entire team here, and it was really cool because we got to sit here and he was sharing the amount of impact that we were actually making. And I think one of the things that is really unique for the way that we operate all together is the fact that we are very cognizant of people outside of our own bubble. And that's something that honestly takes time to do, right? It's very easy to just be focused on the issues that you have in your own life and the things that are affecting you directly, where the reality is that there are things so much bigger than what we're worrying about going on all across the world. And I feel like it's just incredibly important for us to kind of take a step back, and rather than just being, I guess, blind consumers to things, we want to actually spend our money where we care about, what happens to it. And really this was, I want to say probably 4 or 5 years ago. Honestly, all the way back in 2012, I think, is when we did our very first charity release with ZOX. And so we had always been focused on the philanthropic side of it. The water side in particular, though, was really interesting because you see the impact that waterborne illnesses have on some of these countries that don't have access to clean drinking water. And it was tremendous. I personally believe, and Seth from Thirst Project shares the same sentiment, that in our lifetime, there will be a solution to this, and there will be nobody without clean drinking water. But at this point, it's something that, really the way that happens is by brands like ours or different, donors getting together and actually saying, yeah, this is a place that I want to make a difference, and I'm willing to put up money to do that. In 2020, we first started, it was the first year we actually started kind of keeping track of all of our donations. And I think we did just in cash, like just under $500,000 to a few different charities all throughout the year. Obviously 2020 was a pretty crazy year. So there's a lot of different people who needed help. Mm-hmm. And then in 2021, we just finished it up again. And I think we were around 460,000 or something like that. So very similar in actual cash donations. And that's something that we get excited about. And, when we share with our community, we share with everybody because it's not our doing, right? Like that is the community coming together and actually caring about these things enough and continuing to support ZOX so that we can do those.
Yeah, and that's, that really speaks to the real impact that you're having as a brand and some of the good things that you're doing. So kudos to you and your team for that. So let's talk a little bit about live shopping, and ZOX, as I mentioned, and you've alluded to, is testing live shopping on the Facebook social media platform. So tell us a little bit about how that kind of partnership came about and what's attractive about it for ZOX.
Sure. We have been involved with Facebook for a long time, and I think one of the most refreshing things about them that most people don't really get to see is the fact that they have incredibly diligent teams working to make the best products possible. And I think it's so easy to get frustrated and say, oh, it's a huge company, they don't care about me or whatever. And then you actually see the inner workings of it, even a little bit that I've gotten to see. And I've been blown away by the level of detail that they put into making products that actually help brands really reach their audience in a way that's meaningful to them. Like I touched on earlier, consumers nowadays have more options than ever before of where to spend their money. And if you aren't doing something that allows you to meet them exactly where they are, you're missing out. And I really believe that's where live shopping was incredibly valuable for us, is because, one of the biggest things we kind of talk about with the almost kind of the bummer of not having a physical retail store is the fact that if you came to our site, looked around, and then didn't buy anything, I don't get to talk to you. I don't get to say, oh, I'm sorry, you didn't find anything. What are you looking for? I don't get to say anything to you, really. And so live shopping, and really the interest for me more than anything behind that, is we're able to treat that very similar to that retail experience, where people get to actually come in, watch the lives, get to hang out with me and ask questions. It's a lot of fun. It lets me kind of know what they're interested in, what I should be talking more about, and really highlight the things that I think matter in a very personal way.
Yeah. So it kind of gives a good idea of why ZOX has engaged in this partnership and why it's a good idea for your brand. Secondary part and follow up to that is, let's talk a little bit about the execution of it. So tell us a little about kind of the level of participation that's needed across the ZOX organization to get these live streams up and going, and then how are you promoting that? How are you making it known to your audience that these are taking place?
So the interesting thing about live shopping is that you can set it up and go live, honestly, in a couple minutes. It is not difficult to do at all. However, I think that there is a lot of value in terms of planning it correctly, creating a great playlist that allows you to kind of have some extra surprises. Let's say that we start to get a really big live going and we have a lot of people in there, and I want to introduce something new that wasn't even available on the site, for example. We've done that a few different times and had products sell out literally in seconds using a live stream. But the reality is that, typically when you're doing one, it's either yourself, maybe one other person. I tried it with 3, but it was kind of funny. We looked like a family photo, kind of like angled, you're doing it portrait mode on your phone. So it was people kind of standing behind each other, but it, I guess it could be done. It also is really helpful, especially if you, for us, it's a wristband, so it's something small, but if it's something larger, like hoodies or backpacks, for example, it's really easy for me to show it on somebody, which I thought was really cool. So in terms of, overall, I guess, headcount needed for it really is just one person, though I think a couple is a lot more helpful, especially if you have a community with a lot of people asking questions. Because what we'll do, for example, is, I'll go live with a playlist already set up. And then while I'm talking, we will have people in our comments sitting here kind of responding to questions that different people have, or pinning questions that get asked a lot, pinning responses to those so that everybody can kind of see it all at once. But it is really helpful to have. I wouldn't say it's a necessity, but it definitely makes for a better experience overall.
Yeah, and like you noted, kind of getting those one-to-one interactions with the customer that you might not have, since ZOX does not have that physical store presence. This can be kind of a replacement for that.
Yeah, totally can.
So my final question, Jason, is kind of, where you're seeing opportunities for growth? Where are you kind of having your attention focused as you look to continue to sustain and even grow upon the positive momentum that the ZOX brand has generated?
Yeah, I think there's it's so easy to get distracted by a lot of shiny objects, if you will, right? Where you're constantly finding yourself saying, oh, what about this? What about this? We grew our team substantially in the past year, especially in our marketing department and our creative department, and really focusing on just how can we make the best products that are most meaningful to people while continuing to meet them exactly where they are. And I think a big part of that comes back to retention more than anything else. It's one thing to spend money to get in front of people. It's another thing to be smart enough to maintain a relationship with them. And I don't even think it's necessarily, smart in like a conniving way by any means. I think it's smart in terms of you actually care about the relationship that you have with that person. And to be honest, I think people are smart enough that they can tell whether or not that relationship is genuine or not. So for us, such a huge part of what we are focusing on is maintaining genuine, real relationships where people feel like they get to interact with us personally. They do. We're super active in our community. We listen. We take input very seriously, whether it is products people wish existed, ways we did releases differently, things that they have noticed that don't quite jive with everything else we've said. We'll take that into consideration and always work to improve. And I think that by continuing to really double down on the relationship that we have with collectors and with, as we refer to them as ZOXers in general. Such a big part of that is based on just a real authentic engagement from the very beginning.
Yeah, that transparency as a brand, that authenticity and really creating those genuine relationships leads to a loyal customer base. So it's something really that you can focus on at ZOX.
Definitely.
Great. Well, I think we're just about out of time, but I want to take the opportunity to thank Jason Kuipers, again, the CEO and founder of ZOX, for joining us on this episode of Total Retail Talks. Thank you, Jason.
Thanks, Joe.
Thanks for listening. For more information on this podcast, please check out our podcast channel page at mytotalretail.com/podcasts for show notes. Total Retail Talks is available on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, and Spotify. Make sure to subscribe on our podcast channel page as well. If you've enjoyed this episode, please take a few moments to rate and review this podcast. Thanks, and until next time, this has been Total Retail Talks.
Build long-lasting customer relationships that drive sustainable e-commerce growth. Loyalty Lion's combination of best-in-class technology and dedicated loyalty expertise will help you connect with customers, increase their lifetime value, and improve your marketing ROI. Learn more at loyaltylion.com.